Hello, we are back for I don't know what day it is. I don't know what day it is or part that I'm reading this book. But we're gonna read for 30 minutes. We're gonna read for 30 minutes. Here we go. December 5th. Next class, I'm going to see all your scenes with a preparation. Be prepared. Scenes or exercises, Ray asks. You each have a scene, don't you? Are we supposed to rehearse it at home with a preparation? Anna asks. Not save it until Monday. Save it? No, don't do it. No. Save it? No, do it. Change it if necessary. Do you want the independent activities to be the same? Betty asks, like Anna was putting on her makeup and I was reading a magazine. But each one adds a preparation. On top of it, Betty asks. No, underneath it. Underneath it, Betty repeats, and the class laughs. The person who comes in does the preparation, says Rosemary. What about the person who's sitting there? He has the preparation that comes from the independent activity. One comes from what you're doing, and the other comes from entirely the way you bring the emotion to the surface. So Joseph's case, where he's just sitting there stewing, waiting for his wife to show up, there's preparation in that case. When you prepare, go into a dark corner if you can find one. What we were talking about today. We were talking about what you do imaginatively inside yourself to put you in an emotional state that carries you through the first moment of the scene. Well, what you do imaginatively inside yourself to put you in an emotional state that carries you through the first moment. John raises his hand. Sandy, you said it would be best to find a dark corner or something. To be alone, it helps. Look, the fact that you're sitting here in a relative quiet does not mean that what I said isn't penetrating into you, because it is. Now tell me your interpretation of what I said. What I got out of it, Ray says, is that before the scene begins, through your imagination, maybe by daydreaming or however you go about it, you get yourself tickling, ticking emotionally. So, what you enter the scene, you have an emotional fullness which lasts as long as the first moment. It may or may not come up again in in the course of the scene, but it brings you on alive and full. Before the scene begins, maybe by daydreaming, wherever it goes, you get yourself ticking emotionally so that when you enter the scene, you have emotional fullness which lasts as long as the first moment. I'm gonna write that down. Use your fullest imagination. Okay. Hmm. It may or may not come again in the course of the scene, but it brings you on alive and full. You can't necessarily relate it to the scene because it has to be deeply something deeply personal to you that you know about that only stimulates you. That's right, Meisner says. Sandy, John asks, is there a technique of talking out loud that somehow could pull preparation out of us rather than thinking about it? I'll tell you something in answer to your question. There's nothing as personal as what makes an actor act. And 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 all the personal secrets things preparation is the most. That's why I'm not saying anything more today. Ray raises his hand. In other words, you're saying you can't tell us how to do it, just that we have to do it. I don't mean that to sound like a glib. You're saying it's a totally personal thing and there's no technique of it. Preparation is simply something that might take place and we just have to learn to do it. It's something that should take place, Meisner says, and I'm pointing out as is possible a conscious way of starting the process. You follow? December 8th. Leela and Dave are about to perform a scene from Williams in Ng's The Dark at the Top of the Stairs. What are the circumstances preceding the actual scene, Leila? Meisner asks. Rini comes in. I tell her that I think it would be good for her to go to the party, and she gets upset and goes out to practice the piano. That's the story of the play, right? I say what precedes that scene is that you're altering a dress which is going to make your daughter the belle of the ball. How do you feel about that? Oh, I'm elated. It's a beautiful dress. So, oh, so Leela King is in the condition of elation, right? Now, I don't know how you're going to induce elation. You may get it from remembering a good notice you had some years ago. You may get it from the fact that tomorrow you're going to take down Eth- Ethel Barrymore's name and put up Lily King's. I don't know where your imagination is going to lead you, but when you're ready, sit down with that dress and do anything you want. Sing to yourself, maybe while you're altering. Then we'll have not Leela King, the actress, but Leela King, the elated woman. Who's to stop you except the dumb director from waltzing around the room with the dress? Who's going to stop you? Not me. Meisner turns to Dave. Now we have the husband. $19.95. What does that mean? Murder, Dave says. She's gone out behind my back and spent this huge amount of money. Go into the fact that you can't afford it. We barely have enough money to pay the rent and the electric bill. We can hardly make we can hardly make ends meet, let alone have any money for extras like party dresses. That's the foundation for building in you an emotional attitude, which has to do with financial destruction. We won't go too far into this scene, but set yourself up in here, then go outside. When you're ready, come inside and act, right? Has what I've said to you been clear? They both nod. You should go out to different corners. Dave, make sure that she's in here before you enter. Leela and Dave leave the room, closing the door. It's really it's really very simple, isn't it? Miser says. It just takes a few years to learn. After a few minutes, Leela enters, takes the dress from the table, and holding it before her, admires her reflection in the full length mirror against the wall. She begins to hum contentedly, then sits on the table to thread a needle. Dave enters suddenly, and the scene begins. 3 or 4 minutes pass before Meisner stops them. Let's talk about this. It's all right, nothing wrong with it, but it's a question of quantity, not quality. What does that mean? Quantity instead of quality. The quality of your behavior is good. I'm talking only about the beginning. It's not full enough. I'll show you what I mean. Dave, when you came in and saw her dancing around with her dress, had it made you want to tear yourself to pieces because here's the proof that she's ruining you. I would have loved it. You follow? And Leela, if before he came in we saw you dancing like a 15-year-old girl like your daughter, I would have loved that. Dave, unless I'm quite wrong, which is possible, to be disgusted, revolted, and furious at somebody's unrecognizable behavior should not be difficult for you, right or wrong. You're right, Dave says. That's what I was looking for. You follow? And Leela, to like to be like a 15-year-old girl dancing around with a dress as if you were the belle of the ball would, I think, come easily to you. To be like a plus front dress as if you were the belle of the ball would, I think, come easily to you. She nods in agreement. That's what I was looking for. But we're at the beginning, and to begin with a full emotional inner life is difficult at best. I just want to show you the possibilities that are open to you. Both of you have always had reality in this scene. It never achieved the fullness it might have, but you always have emotions of the right quality. I'm talking about fullness at the beginning, that's all. What I'm trying to establish today are the qualities of preparations that are fuller than simply knowing that you, Dave, are angry at her because she's extravagant, or that you, Leela, are elated. That's what I'm talking about. December 12th, Ray and Rachel. Ray and Rachel. Rachel. A thin and pretty blonde young woman who, like Anna, works as a model, are about to begin their scene. Why do you come in? Meisner asked Rachel. I'm coming in to tell him you don't have to worry about that. The scene will take care of that. Where are you coming from? From my new lover's place. How new? 7 months. Almost a record, Meisner says, and the class laughs. Okay, you're coming from your lover of 7 months. What can you invent? What can your imagination invent that happened tonight to put you on cloud seven? You got something? Rachel nods. Personal to you? Right. She blushes and continues to nod. Now, Ray, let's take what I said to Joseph before. You're deeply humiliated, like a child who has been publicly embarrassed and scorned by all other children, right? When you're both ready, come in. When they leave the room, Meisner says, there's been no problem in their being able to handle their script in any alive way. But now we're talking about a different level. What's the level? The level the level of preparation, Vince says. Preparation brings you to it, Meisner says. The personal level, Rosemary says. Emotional honesty, John adds. Fullness, Meisner exclaims. Where are we moving? To a fuller emotional plane, Beth says. After a few minutes, the door opens. Ray enters and sits on the bed. Rachel comes in, the scene begins, and they play it through the end. All right, Meisner says. That helped. The behavior was more meaningful than last time. Now I want to try something. Rachel, I want you to go outside, and when you feel as if finally all your dreams are coming true, dance in. I don't care what you do. Go outside and prepare for that. Okay, Rachel says. With or without the text? With the text, Meisner says. But Rachel, I want to see you at your most ecstatic. I don't care if you get it from buckwheat cakes and Ray. I want you to sit on that bed with your back to the door and cry and keep on crying until your heart breaks. I don't care if you get it from the fact that your dog died. If you want to be private, go outside and then come back in. Both leave in order to prepare. In a few moments, they return and perform the scene again. This doesn't change as much with you, Ray, as it did with you. He looks at Rachel, though it was rather slight. Look, Ray, are you sensitive to tears? Do you mean am I sensitive to somebody else crying? Why didn't you cry? I don't know. Were you self-conscious? Somewhat. I think I was trying too hard. I think I felt I needed to succeed, and that was what my mind that's was what my was in my mind. You don't need to succeed, you need to learn, right? Ray nods in agreement. I said cry. That's a result. I don't care if that's because the waiter brought you fried eggs instead of scrambled. I wanted to see you break down, that's all. And Rachel, I wanted to see you come in like Carmen. That's what I was looking for. A dramatic change in the scene was going. Ray says, something entirely different. Meisner says, work on it. We'll see what you can do with it next time. December 15th. Let's have Mr. Roberts, Meisner says. John and Ralph come forward and sit on two gray metal folding chairs in the middle of the classroom. John, we know from the play that Ralph's character is a pain in the butt, right? We know that you would do anything to squash him, right? And finally, you've got something on him. What is it? I have a letter, John says. That proves to me that he messed up. No, leave for the men. How do you feel about that? How do I feel? Ecstatic. So sit behind your desk and enjoy your power, Meisner says. This is a scene about a cruel bastard whose greatest pleasure is to watch someone electrocuted and who's getting his wish. John moves his chair behind the long table and begins to arrange into a neat pile some papers he has brought with him. Now, Ralph, did I ever tell you the magic if? There's this scene is as if you've just come from a funeral of your 3-year old brother. In other words, a tragedy is occurring. Never mind that this scene is about the Navy. Emotionally, a tragedy is occurring. You follow? Ralph nods. Go out and prepare. Johnny, just sit there and tickle yourself with pleasure. That's all. But go outside if you want to. John starts to leave, and Meisner begins to speak again. Haven't you all had marvelous dreams in which you killed somebody? Dreams where you've taken revenge and killed somebody you hate? John says, no. Well, you have to find a substitution for it. John nods and leaves the room. Meisner looks at Rosemary. Suppose your best friend once said, Rosemary, give up acting. You haven't got it. Now, you've just opened in a play in which you got all the notices and she got fired. Isn't that a wonderful feeling? Rosemary grins. Are you beginning to see how this works? Meisner asked, looking around the class. Yes, but not anonymously. You wouldn't give me that satisfaction, would you? In a few minutes, John returns to his table and begins to read with a pleasure a typed letter on top of his stack of papers. Ralph knocks on the door, and John tells him to enter and take a chair. Ralph sits before John's desk like a small boy brought up before the principal. His preparation is very full, and as the scene progresses, he becomes increasingly desperate for the obdurate cruelty of his superior. With tears in his eyes, he pleads for the order canceling to leave off of his men to be rescinded. At the end, when through a twist of the plot, the captain is forced to rescind the order, Ralph heaves a sigh of relief and cries openly with joy. That was good, Meisner says. You see what preparation does for you? Ralph, your emotion was lovely. Thank you, Ralph says. He is clearly pleased and smiles even as he blows his nose and wipes his eyes with his handkerchief. How's that for a Christmas present? Meisner asks. Ralph nods, and the class laughs. Meisner stands on the corner of 54th Street and First Avenue looking for a cab to take him to his apartment. Dave concerns me, he says. There's a level of emotional reserve in his work, and that isn't productive in an actor. It's as though he searches for reasons not becoming involved, for not acting fully. Restraint is a virtue, but reticence in an actor isn't. This is a problem he's going to have to grapple with. Of course, I love Sturm and Undrang. If I go to a restaurant and there's no salt on the table, they have to carry me to bed. I wish a bit of that could rub off onto Dave. A fine mist begins to fall, and there are no cabs in sight. Ray, though, is developing nicely, he says. So is Rachel. They tell me that he was studying to become a Jesuit, but he was defrocking from drinking and communion wine. That's probably not true. He's intelligent. I can always count on him to summarize accurately whatever point I'm struggling to make. Of all of them, he would make the best teacher, I think. A cab turns onto the avenue and Meisner raises his cane to hail it. So he couldn't break down. That's not important at his early stage. As I said, preparation is very simple. It takes a few years to learn. The cab pulls up and Meisner gets in. Okay. Chapter 7. Okay, I've got 9 minutes left. Let's see where I can go with this. One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7, 8. About 16 pages. All right. Improvisation. Let us learn some characteristics of daydreaming. We can begin by saying that happy people never make fantasies, only unsatisfied ones. Unsatisfied wishes are the driving power behind fantasies. Every separate fantasy continues the fulfillment of a wish and improves on unsatisfactory reality. The impelling wishes vary according to the character, to the gender of the character, and circumstances of the creator. They may be easily divided, however, into two principal groups. Either they are ambitious wishes serving to exalt the person creating them, or they are erotic. In younger women, erotic wishes dominate the fantasies almost exclusively, for their ambition is generally compromised in their erotic longings. In young men, egoistic and ambitious wishes assert themselves plainly enough alongside their erotic desires. But we will not lay stress on the distinction between those two trends. We prefer to emphasize the fact that they are often united. In many altarpieces, the portrait of the donor is to be found in one corner of the picture, and in great numbers of ambitious daydreams, too, we can discover a woman in some corner for whom the dreamer performs all his heroic deeds. And all those feet at his triumphs, all to be laid, are to be laid. Okay. February 6th. That's my birthday. Okay, sorry. Vincent, just ask me a peculiar question. When do we begin on character work? Well, in one way, you never begin on character work. In another way, you've already begun to do characters because character comes by how you feel about something. So every time you get up and did an exercise, you were playing a character through the word, though the word wasn't mentioned. For the most part, character is an emotional thing. The internal part of your character is defined by how you feel about something. If you go into a clothing store, for example, and see a suit that you like very much but can't afford and you buy it anyway, what kind of person are you? Impulsive, Joseph says. Impulsive, Meisner repeats. Or foolhardy. What, or that would be the essence of an internal component of the character. Let's take a difficult Steinberg character like Miss Julie. Her wish to destroy men because of her hatred of them also makes her want to look beautiful so that she can entice them into a trap and destroy their egos. Here are two components of character. The inner component, which determines the kind of person she is, a destroyer of men, which dictated by Steinberg, and which the actress intuitively extracts from the written text, and an outer component, the external portrait, ep- epitomizing her wish to be beautiful. What about her accents? Joseph asks. Are there inner or outer components of character? The man who recently arrived in America from France might have a heavy, distinctly French accent. But if the author tells us that he has spoken English for most of his life, he might have only a trace of an accent. But neither circumstance would mitigate the fact that at heart he is French, cosmopolitan, witty, cynical, in love, whatever the idea of being French might instinctively mean to you. At this early stage of your work, you might rely on your instinctive reaction to the playwright's text. At this point, character is justified by your inner response to what you read in text. But remember, an accent is not basic and organic to the character. It's an external attribute like red hair or a gold tooth. The basic thing is an emotional essence, cosmos cosmopolitan, cynical. That's the source of a character. He looks at Vincent for a moment. You look like a disappointed character to me, Vince, because you're not hearing what you want to hear. Vince starts to speak but stops. Look, Meisner says, if somebody says to two people, do you want to drink some unbelievably strong Japanese sake? And the first guy says impatiently, yeah, I do. And the other guy says, yes. Pause. Pause. I do. Their words are the same, but are they the same or do they have different characters? Um, Vince, you started me on this, so I'm asking you one character you can define as being what? Impulsive, Vince says. Impulsive, and the other? Cautious. Well, that's how you establish character. This will become clearer when we begin to work with the material from Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River and anthology. Vince, I'm glad you asked me that question. I didn't mean to start this way, but I guess I'm an adjustable character. Here's the outline of an exercise that everybody's going to do. Two people are living together, not necessarily one person has an independent activity and the other one comes in from some situation which requires a vivid preparation. I said that you're living together, so there's no question of knocking on the door, but you can live separately if you want to. That's your choice. That's the exercise. Two people of whom has an independent activity and the other of whom comes home from some situation which he has created and for which he has prepared. The process of one working off each other, the moment to moment. That's essentially the improvisation. Ray, who's your partner? Rosemary. All right, come up here, you both. You're living together, and Ray, you're at home. That means you have a genuine independent activity. It doesn't have anything to do with her, it's entirely yours. And that's what you'll be doing. Have you something to do? I have a script here which I could memorize for an audition, Ray says. Good. Now, Rosemary, you have just come from a situation of your own invention, out of which you get a preparation. Preparation is a self stimulation. Your nature, your instinct dictates the kind of preparation you want. If you've just gotten a great part in a wonderful show, the self stimulation that is your preparation could be that you're divinely happy. It could also be that you're mystified by how this wonderful situation came about. Aren't you lucky? Rosemary nods. So to begin with, we have Ray at home immersed in his independent activity, and then Rosemary comes home from some invented situation out of which has extracted a preparation. Then you work off each other's behavior moment to moment. Are there any questions? Sandy, John asks. Are you saying that when we come up with a make believe situation for ourselves, we try to make it so real that it can move us emotionally? You must. Okay, let's start, Rosemary. Where is your hat and coat? Rosemary takes her coat and her purse from a chair and starts to leave the room. Ray, where are you going to do your independent activity? Here, Ray says, in my house. It's her house, too. Yeah, Rosemary says. I don't have a knock. Who are you to each other? Should we decide that together? Ray asks. It is necessary for me to know what she thinks our relationship is. It's necessary for you to know if you're living together as man and wife or brother and sister or whatever. Rosemary asks in an exercise like this. It is better to come in with a feeling or to come in with a purpose. If you were just fired from your dream part and came in fully prepared and determined to write that director a letter, you could do that. Or you could come in just writing your preparation just because we live together, Rosemary says. Doesn't that mean that when I come home, I find the other person at home too? I mean, I could come in and find an empty apartment. That's correct. Along this line, Ray says, I wanted to ask if the preparation that the person who's entering uses the self stimulant himself emotionally can be connected to the person who's in the room. It's much better at first if it's not, Meisner says. Meisner says, "Come on, let's see what you do." Ray and Rosemary whisper together briefly when she leaves the room. He sits at the long table with his script and begins to memorize it. After a few minutes, she enters and they perform the exercise as Meisner has outlined it. Okay, how was that? Meisner asks. No one wants to offer their opinion. Pretty good. You'd say that, Joseph? Pretty good? Why? Because her emotion was truthful, and he was aware and working of it. What was her character? Angry, tempestuous, I think. His character? Helpful? Right. Let's have another. Who wants to go? Ray and Rosemary returned to their chairs. Incidentally, Ray, your independent activity wasn't interesting enough. I just made it up when you called us because I hadn't come prepared with one. How could you have made it more interesting? I could have learned the speech with a particular accent out loud, or I could have done it in a particular rhythm and I had to walk in that rhythm. If that's not too bizarre, you could have done that. I suppose otherwise you were just a plain memorizer, a little too plain. You must learn to make your independent activity more involving and interesting to you. What can you tell me what this exercise is all about? John raises his hand. It's being totally involved in an activity and coming in with a full preparation, then reacting honestly to an outside source and going along from moment to moment. Hmm. Preparation. Um, to an outside source. What's the outside source? Well, the activity could be also your partner. Yes, it's your partner. What does it mean to use what exists, Joseph? To allow what exists to affect you rather than working out your head. What you think should exist so that you're working from an actual point. Right? What you think should exist. That's about right, Meisner says reflectively. That's about right. He adjusts the microphone attached to his eyeglasses. You see, this exercise adds another dimension. The actor doing the independent activity is now not just being interrupted. Rather, he is confronted by his partner, whose inner life, because of his preparation, is compelling and persuasive. The partner enters the room with full emotion, and the two of them react to each other moment to moment. Let's talk about this. It's nearer to what's wanted, Meisner says. John and Rachel stop improvising and sit down together on the bed against the wall. John, where did you come from? I came from seeing someone on the street. Seeing who? A writer whose play I want to produce. He's very peculiar. He's very particular. It's almost impossible to get his permission, but he agreed to give me 30 minutes of his time to tell him my ideas to see if we agree. Okay, listen, everybody. It's because you met a playwright, and it's because he has a play you'd like to produce, and it's because he said he'd come and talk to you. How do you feel? I feel excited. Then you could come, then you could have more excitement, you see? The more you have, the more you have, the more you have, the more she would be stopped from doing her independent activity. Because you didn't pick a situation which is proactive enough to you, she didn't bring in a full enough emotion. What's that mean? It means that I didn't generate a real, honest, strong feeling that overwhelmed me, John says. And what would you need to get that? A better situation that moves me. And then you improvise. Ray raises his hand. When you say improvise, do you mean that we should be doing less repetition and more talking so that it sounds more like dialogue? I know what you mean by improvisation, but what I'm asking is, does it lead to something that sounds like a dialogue and less repetition? Yes. Okay. The other question I have is that the relationship between two people doesn't seem to matter at this point, except that it removes a knock and spontaneously affects the attitude they have toward each other. Yes. Other than that, it's just like what we've been doing. Yes, this improvisation is the same thing as the exercise you've been doing all along, except it adds a stronger, fuller preparation. What have I added to the exercise that you did before Christmas? You've added that we know who we are to each other when we enter, Betty says. And I added to you, and I added that you come in from a strong situation, which gives you a strong springboard for a full preparation. You have to have a story as well as your emotional preparation, right? Ray asks. Earlier, emotional preparation was anything you imagine to set yourself off emotionally. But now we have to give it justification, Meisner says. Yeah, so that I'm able to say that the emotion I came into the room with this result of something that just happened to me. That strengthens it, Rosemary says. Doesn't it? Sure. It makes it more like a play, Ray adds. No, it makes you fuller. You must give your self stimulation more of a chance to be deeper and bigger. What's that mean? Don't put limitations on your emotional behavior, Rosemary says. Certainly not. That's right. It's difficult to do because we have been training since we were children to be restrained emotionally. At least some of us have. And every day we're constantly aware of what our proper limitations are. We always know what our boundaries are, and it's difficult to break them, even in an acting class. But emotional freedom gets easier when you try to go along the path your inner life is sending you. I'm glad you said that, Meisner says, and the class laughs. 41 minutes? Oh my God. Okay. I will see y'all later tonight. Peace.